Good evening. Welcome to Monday with Mondainé. And of course, I'm E.D. Mondainé. Tonight, I am so pleased to have Naim Hassan with us, a medal winner, an Olympiad, specializing in Taekwondo, a demonstration sport at the 1988 Seoul Olympics. He is a Portlander that attended Portland State University, earning a degree in business administration and marketing. He owns his own photography studio. Man, this dude is outstanding, and we're glad to have him with us tonight as we're discovering how to reach your greatest potential by moving into that inner core that makes you great. Welcome, Naim.
Thank you.
Naim, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
You know what? If it was any better, it'd probably be a sin. But it's good to be here with you. Your energy and everything that you bring, wow. We're talking about finding our inner core tonight and how desperate we are to get there that makes us better people. What are your thoughts around that?
Finding that inner core brings me back to my childhood, actually. I think we had this conversation before, being raised by my grandparents and knowing my father and mother were young and spending a lot of time in my room asking those questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do I fit into this wonderful family?
Where did that come in? I mean, why did you feel that way?
Well, as you get older, you realize my father would come and he'd leave. And so there was always those questions about, I want to go, but I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, you think about 15 or a teenager, I couldn't go to the places they were going. And so I'd be sitting at home, sad, crying, wondering, how come I can't go?
Yeah.
And how do I fit into this big dynamic, this family? And it's the kind of thing that you don't grow up talking about.
Well, you were also absent of your mother, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that when we're absent of that family environment or that family piece, that leaves us wondering even more. So tell us about that pushed you in that place.
Well, I didn't know. I mean, I knew my mother. Like I said, they were 15 when I was born, raised by my grandparents. I can remember distinctly seeing her a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
One was really traumatic, the last time I remember. And I still have reactions to that 50 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Because there was a day that she came to my grandparents' house threatening to take me away.
Mm-hmm.
And where we were going to go, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I'd been with my grandparents for as long as I can remember. And that was home. And the thought of being removed from that environment just literally freaked me out.
Yeah.
I remember going to my room and sitting and crying like I was in Alaska without a coat,
Yeah.
literally.
Well, there's a lot of us who grow up without that family environment, and it leaves us asking the kind of questions like, who am I? So I'm sure that probably was your case.
Part of it was, but I think I was too young to really answer or even ask that kind of question.
Okay.
Right? I mean, because I had my grandparents, my grandfather, he was a huge example, my uncles. We had lots of time to play, and like we were talking a little bit earlier, when I'd get frustrated or afraid, depending on the time of day, if it was during the day, I could go outside and play. And that was a great distraction, particularly when it came to the discomfort that I was feeling. During the evening, I would go to my room and draw and color, and so I was creative, and that was my outlet. And so I intuitively found ways to soothe that pain.
Would that also be called like masking?
I didn't have a word for it.
Yeah.
But I knew it worked.
But if we would equate that to the language that we speak today, would probably be masking.
Probably,
Okay.
yeah.
So once you got through with the masking state, and you had to really find yourself. Tell us about that. Now, you didn't become a Taekwondo expert and an Olympiad just overnight.
No.
So tell us about that.
So
and how
my
you had to-
background was in athletics. I grew up in
Okay.
a very athletic family.
Yeah.
My uncles and folks were baseball players and football, basketball players, so we had access, and that's what we did. Neighborhood kids, we'd go outside in the streets and play games. And it's interesting because I remember going to the local school, throwing the ball against the wall. right, in tears.
Mm-hmm.
And the harder I would throw, I'd miss it, and I'd have to run down to the playground to catch the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So I got really good at catching the ball, right? But that was one of those unintended consequences or benefit because it helped me when I became a baseball player,
Yeah.
right? And played really, we were really good, made all-star teams, but that was our outlet.
Yeah.
That was our outlet. And I just over the years finding those kinds of things without being directed.
Mm-hmm. So when did you start asking yourself, where do I go and how do I reach that place where I really want to excel and I want to push towards those things? Can you tell us something about that?
That was a little bit later. I think that was when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, well, it's probably a senior in high school when things clicked in terms of wanting to be better at school.
Okay.
And I had a high school football coach, Mr. Simpson, who suggested, hey, you go to Mount Hood, major in business. Okay, I didn't know. So one of the things I can say is that there were certain periods in my life where people came into my life that I developed a trust, and they spoke into me. Right. They made suggestions. One how I got involved in martial arts, we talked about that before. It was a gentleman named Ali Muhammad came to my father's restaurant, and he said, hey, you'd be good at this martial arts stuff. I didn't know what it was, and so I started taking classes my junior and senior year between my junior and senior year in high school. And then after high school, I went to Mount Hood Community College, and there was a Taekwondo class that was a PE class. So I got involved in Taekwondo as a PE class and then start training and going to tournaments. And I really enjoyed the individual nature of the training. I was one of those kids, I'd be, at the basketball court till 10, 11 o'clock at night just working on stuff.
Okay, so in your working and in your doing the things that you did to discover your talents and the art that's in that, where was your persona? Where were you at as a person? How do I get to that next step? How do I put everything that I'm espousing to become what I need to be? And what do I need to be?
I don't remember exactly. When, because it wasn't like a defining moment. It was something that evolved, I believe. It was an evolution of going from high school I got introduced to martial arts and got really involved in that. And I think what drove me was the individual nature of the training. Team sports were great, but I felt, and I experienced working extra and not feeling like I got the benefit of the extra work until I got involved in the martial arts training, which was totally individual. And I was comfortable working. Okay. I'd go into my closet and to my little space and work for hours. I started seeing the benefit of that work.
What were those benefits?
Winning.
Winning.
That was the goal, win. And so I figured out how to training, relying on all of the conditioning and exercises that I learned from other sports, football, basketball, baseball, track and field, and bringing those elements, particularly the conditioning part, into my martial arts training. And it was about conditioning. I could go into my workout space and spend hours by myself just working on stuff.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, my Taekwondo school was just across the street from here. And I had a key, and I would go on weekends and holidays. Before Thanksgiving, I'd be in the gym working, or Christmas morning, I'd be over across the street working. And then I'd go home and join the rest of the family. And
so it seemed like you were pretty full and pretty occupied. So I want to talk about when those things weren't enough and you knew that there was something deeper and you knew that you had to push towards more. What were some of the formulas that you used, and how did you find the space to find that inner self that says, this is what I want to do? And, did you ever have a ta-da moment in your life where you said, hey, I need to get here, and how do I get there?
It's interesting because when I look back at my journey, I have to say it's rooted in lack of resources. And I'm going to explain why. See, when I didn't have a lot of resources, there weren't a lot of options.
Yeah.
Right? I can't choose 5 things. I have to choose one.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I got really good at choosing the one that really resonated with my spirit. And I didn't know what that meant. I just know that it felt right. I knew I enjoyed it. I knew I could spend time and never watch the clock. And when I look back at the things that I have done, those are the things that I have gravitated towards.
Yeah.
There's something in that connected with my spirit that felt right, and that's what I went with.
You know, when we talk about finding that place to where we want to begin, you know, me as a vocalist, me as a entertainer, me as an entrepreneur, I often thought, I can't do this. And I don't think that there's, you know, you can get the education, you can go to school, anybody can do that.
Sure.
But moving beyond the education and how to put that education to work, what would you say to somebody who's looking for how do I break out? And what is it that I need to do to move into the center of what I really want to be?
You know, I think we know, right? We know what that feels like. When we're engaged in that thing that really feeds our spirit, we know. What we don't know is or trust that that thing can work for us. Because there's all these other shiny objects in our environment say, you should be doing this, you should be pursuing whatever, and never giving credence or credit to that thing that's really resonating in our spirit.
Yeah.
That's been my life,
Yeah.
right? Because none of the things I ended up doing were things that people told me that or encouraged me to really do.
So it's really about finding that introspection and self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And trusting it. And the trust part is work, right? You can say, oh, yeah, I trust. But no, that means that you show up every day and you invest a little bit of time with many cases, no idea how it's all going to manifest.
Yeah.
And that's where I know we've had difficulty because we want to know how it's all going to work out.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
But if we're moving on faith, as we talk about,
Yeah.
you can't know how it's going to work out.
Right.
We just have to be inspired to move when it's time to move and be consistent at moving at whatever pace that is and know that it's going to work the way it works. And that's been my experience.
Self-awareness, just being self-aware. You know, if you're just joining us this evening, we're talking about finding that inner core, that place where you have to motivate yourself to move beyond or where you are, and finding the strength and placing yourself to move there. And we're speaking to Naim Hassan, and I'm really interested in knowing when you did kind of connect with where you wanted to be. How scary was that for you?
Yeah, it's always nerve-wracking because there's uncertainty, right? And that's the piece that
when you talk about uncertainty,
we want to know how it's all going to work out.
Yeah,
right.
We're nosy, right?
If I choose A, I want to know that A is going to get me the results that I think I want.
Yeah,
right. But that's not how it works. And over the years, learning that that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
And trusting that if you invest the time and energy in this thing, something is going to manifest in its own time. And I've had that experience, and we get impatient. We want it now, but we can't have it now. And there's frustration and all those kinds of things. And I know for a fact that's where we get derailed. You have a goal, whatever it is, and this process is like pouring molasses out of a glass on a cold day. It doesn't move very fast.
No.
And when we are pursuing goals and dreams, whatever, that's the pace.
Yeah.
And we can become frustrated, all of it. I've become frustrated with that pace until I started to understand, oh, no, this is the pace, which is one of the reasons realistically why I have chosen to have my own business, run it at my own pace, and not have a team of folks. Because I go to corporate meetings and I listen to folks talk about goals and dreams. And January 1, you set a new goal. By December 31, you have to meet these quotas. And realistically, that's not accurate. And so it inspires folks to do things that aren't always above board just to meet the quota.
So it's always about self-discovery. And we've talked about that never really ending.
Never ends.
Until you're out of here. Okay?
That never ends.
So when we make those discoveries, we have to find the strength to just stand up in them and move forward. You mentioned you chose to go into business. Now, we understand that you're a Taekwondo master and that you are an Olympiad that's won medals and et cetera. What do you do? Tell us about your photography.
I've always had access to the tool. Again, it was one of those things that was never encouraged. No one, I would often hear, you can't make it as a creative. Mm-hmm. Okay? Which is not true. But having a business background and the passion for doing the work, learning that 15% of what I do is actually taking pictures. Mm-hmm. The other 85% is building relationships in the business community and understanding what those relationships mean and how to foster those relationships and being accountable to the relationship.
Before we get too far, you talked about being a creative and you being discouraged because folks would tell you that you really can't make a living at being a creative. What is that exactly? Talk about what that creative is. What is that?
So for me, I was an artist. I drew. I was a painter. And I would take my camera and go to places and take photos because I wouldn't have time to sit and draw the scene. Mm-hmm. That's how I actually got into taking photos with Polaroid.
So it's pretty safe to say that the creative is what you see inside of yourself, as he mentioned before, knowing you already know.
Yeah.
You know what you're good at. You understand what it is that you might want to venture to do, but then you have to kind of push yourself out there to do it.
Yes.
Right?
A lot of folks we know, some folks like to write and sing and play music and dance and all those things. And depending on the environment, someone might encourage, provide access to those resources either in school or other associations where you can continue to grow, and some folks may not know how to do that. Mm-hmm. But one thing I know is that spirit doesn't die, and at some point we find an outlet for it. Mm-hmm. The camera became my outlet, and being able to just take that tool and not have any specific person or place or thing to photograph, I could just go out and walk the neighborhood, take pictures of things, and connect with the environment. And I found that in doing that, there was a peacefulness. So I still do it. Mm-hmm. There was a peacefulness in just going out and just paying attention. Mm-hmm. Noticing things that most people just walk past. The better I've gotten at doing that, I can tell you there's a peacefulness. When I travel to other places in the world, I don't go with agendas. I will show up. The last trip was a couple of months ago. I went to Copenhagen, Denmark. Mm-hmm. And I would walk out my hotel and I would just stand there and literally feel the spirit tug me in a direction. And I'd walk in that direction. And I just walk and I notice things and I would feel something in the environment. It could be a structure. And I'd take a picture of the structure. And I'd continue walking.
Now, when you went to that trip, it's really important to note, he was telling me about his remarkable trip to Denmark. And something that he did was he left his phone and didn't have any communication and didn't know how to communicate with the people there locally. So he just had to go solo. He had to connect with his inner core, that other percent. You talked about a small percentage of you, the talent of taking pictures, but that greater percentage is developing a relationship with people and helping other people to kind of help fulfill what that gifting is inside of you. Is that what you're saying to us?
In that example, it was being there without that tool forced me to just get out and just be present with people, the environment, and notice things and connect with people. And it's interesting being in some of those places when you can't speak the language. I think that was part of it. Not being able to speak the language, which meant that I wasn't distracted by conversations. I could be in my own headspace, practicing being present, practicing my internal dialogue, which we talked about. And it was peaceful.
Yeah.
It was very peaceful.
Yeah.
after getting over the initial shock that I didn't have my phone in a foreign country. But what do? I had to accept the fact that I don't have a phone in a foreign country, and I have to figure out what to do.
Well, not having a phone at home is horrible. Have you ever not had your phone and you don't know anybody's number? And I don't know. I mean, I have to carry a little book around with important numbers in them so that I can find it. Listen, we have to kind of make a line item out of what we need to do. So if we're talking about finding that inner core, and we talked about number one, what would the number one line item become? If I was to say, finding your inner core and getting a hold of the inner person that's in you and bringing that person to life, I would start by doing what? Number one.
Number one, be comfortable in quiet.
Wow. Now write that down. Be comfortable and quiet.
Yep. Be comfortable in quiet. And have something that you can record, either audio or written. So that as these ideas, thoughts, feelings, you can write them down, because they will come flooding in. And what is important, I've been practicing, is non-judgment. Not to judge what you think, what that voice is telling you, just capture it.
Okay. So number one would be just being comfortable.
Being comfortable, and quiet. Number two, have something to write on and write with. Record.
Yeah.
Record that conversation.
Yeah.
Really, that's the beginning. And then developing over time a trust in what you're hearing and what you're feeling
so
is
I think
true.
That would be number three.
Number three, what you're hearing and what you're feeling is true for you.
Wow.
Right. Those three. I mean, that's the beginning, because now we're going to rinse and repeat. Go back to the beginning, find quiet space. And then the fourth thing would experiment with where those places are.
Wow.
I have a place in my house. Notice what happens when you're in the shower. That conversation in your head. How is that? When you're washing dishes, if you wash dishes, right? When you're out walking, go for a walk. Go to the park with no agenda other than just, I'm going to go walk to the park or around the block or someplace, and notice, what are you thinking? And when you get a chance to, I carry my phone in those moments to capture those thoughts. So I have an audio app that I use that I can record my conversations.
Okay.
And then I don't have to think about what I thought about.
So let's go back, because I think it's important that we understand, first of all, you have to get quiet. You have to really begin to listen to yourself. Second of all, you have to really begin to think about what it is that yourself is saying, so you write it down. Thirdly, you would begin to get comfortable with what you're hearing. And then now we're going to institute a way to get to that, right? We're going to find a path there, right? Wow.
Yeah, the thing I found is keeping it simple and manageable, because if we add one more thing to our, quote, busy lives, it becomes one more thing that adds stress. And I know for a fact that if it becomes too stressful, excuse me, we will find reasons to not do it. So start slow, easy, go for walks, short ones. The key, I think, is just paying attention and beginning to trust what you are hearing. Turn off the music with words. That's one thing I highly encourage. Music that's just meditation, soothing music, that I think massages the brain differently, stimulates our thought processes differently, and being comfortable in listening to that voice. And I know for a fact that we have not trained to do that. And so we don't want to sit and listen to ourselves. So we turn on music and we get distracted, because that conversation can be overwhelming depending on what's going on. Think about this. I often think about solitary confinement. It's a form of punishment, because we aren't generally taught how to manage this headspace with all the stories and all the trauma and all the things that are going on. So we drive ourselves completely crazy and nobody does anything to us. And that's one of the things I know that impacts us, which is why we need things to keep us kind of distracted. And the more we can work towards being less distracted by those external things, there's a calmness that comes over. It's like taking your foot off the gas pedal and the car goes quiet, right? We have the same capability.
What I'm hearing is stimulation.
Yeah.
You know, being cautious of that stimulation, whether or not it's overstimulating or understimulating. So we have to do stimulation control,
Yeah,
as it were.
absolutely.
Because if we become too far stimulated in the wrong thing, so we have to really focus on what that core idea was, even from the beginning. Just knowing who you are. Wow.
And remembering this is called practice.
Okay.
Right? It's a practice.
It's work.
Right. It's work. And it's a little bit every day. And we can be impatient because we want results right now. And that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
And we like, oh, this isn't working. Well, it is working. We just don't have the history and understanding how it's working. Mm-hmm. It's not like going to the gym or building something and there's a physical reference that shows, oh, yeah, we completed this task.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about mental and emotional processes, we have to find other references that let us know that progress is being made. Otherwise, we're like, there's nothing happening. This isn't working. But it's working.
So you have to monitor your progress.
Yeah.
That would be number 6.
And understanding what that means for you. Because it isn't tangible in the same way as if I was building something.
Yeah.
This is happening inside my head.
Yeah.
How do you measure that?
Yeah.
And you start to measure it by how you feel.
Yeah.
And getting to a point where, and this is what I learned through a meditation process, is getting to the point where I can have that sense of peace that didn't involve anybody or anything. And that's a huge difference.
Yes.
Because growing up, there was things, right? You wanted things
to
feel good.
Yeah.
And getting to the point where I don't want to have those things control how I live and function.
Yeah.
So getting to that point mentally where I can find my peace, I go for walks, and I can find that peace, and it has nothing to do with anybody or anything, and center myself.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it's made a huge difference.
When we look at the Pew Research, we find that an overwhelming 45% of Americans don't know really where they want to go, even though they've entered college and they've chosen a subject. They don't know what they want, where they want to go, or what they want to do until usually that senior year. And there's an overwhelming group of people that never work in the fields that they're educated. They graduate and they still don't know what to do. Sure. So they pivot towards what's available. Avoiding the pitfalls. What is it that creates that mindset other than perseverance that would say to the people, how do I avoid pitfalls? What worked for you?
The thing about pitfalls I've come to know is they're not all bad.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
It's called an experience.
Okay.
Right. And my thing is, when we're young, we're pointed in a direction, but we have no clue what we're really capable of until we have some experience. And what I'm finding is, particularly growing up, the more experiences, I think of it this way. Those unique experiences are like puzzle pieces. Mm-hmm. And the more you have, the more you can put a picture together.
Yeah.
Right? And if you have limited experiences, it's like, okay, well, I consider those like raw materials. You only have a hammer, as they say, everything looks like a nail. But if you have a toolbox full of diverse pieces of equipment, you can get creative with taking, like we used to do, take a pliers and a screwdriver and turn it into a chisel, right? And so what I'm realizing is diverse experience, particularly youngsters, diverse experience from a lot of different places. It's resources, it's ideas. It stimulates our minds completely different than not suggesting that being on one single track is good or bad. But there could be a limitation in terms of how we think about solving problems that are unique.
Wow.
Right. And it's Quick story. Working in the mailroom at the engineering firm, I put proposals together that was sent out because that's how they marketed the engineering firm.
Yeah.
I took the same format, created a proposal for myself, and sent it out to companies and individuals, which is how I raise money to cover my costs to travel and train.
Okay.
From that experience working in the mailroom. Never would have put those two together, right? And so it's simple things like that. Not simple, but things like that. We are exposed to things that we don't know the value quite yet.
Yeah.
Until later. You know, the journey it's a slow journey, and we are living in a fast-paced world where everything is quick, fast, easy, and that sells because it gets people engaged, and people make money off engagement, and people aren't getting the results. Except that it's
getting
crazy.
the results. Living is really difficult, and it's really hard to do. And until you find out who you are, what you are, and how you need to get there, you'll never get there. So paying attention and finding that inner core, that inner space that really works for you is extremely important. We're talking about moving forward by paying attention and then practicing that which is inside of you. And really importantly, is surrounding yourself with people that are going to help you do that. Hey, we've been talking with Naim Hassan, and we're really glad that you were able to come with us tonight. I want you to do something. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. It's always important to play your part and do your best for community, God, and country. This is E.D. Mondainé. See you next time.
In times gone